Are you like me and do you collect, hoard, whatever you want to call it, embossing powders? I have a ton of these guys, so many. In this video, I'm going to show you a bunch of ways and fun techniques you can use using these guys. It's time to dust them off and put them to use. So let's get to it.
So grab yourself an acrylic block, any shape or size will work. I'm just going to use a circle here. I'm going to take my Wow embossing ink pad and I am just going to basically ink up the acrylic block. It's going to work as a stamp with that embossing ink. Make sure you get a lot on there, and then I'm going to press it down to the paper. And then I'm just going to dump on some embossing powder. Now, what's particularly cool about this and was surprising to me, and I love some surprises, is it actually picked up when I inked up the block and pressed it onto the paper. I can't see because it's clear, but once I put on the powder, I could see it picked up some of the grid lines that were actually etched into the acrylic block too. And I'll show you that in just a second. So anytime I'm using embossing powder that's kind of chunky, I heat from the back first and then go on the front side, and that's just to keep the powder from blowing all over the place. I am using mostly Wow embossing powders, and with Wow embossing powders, as long as you use the powders that are inside the bottle it came in, you don't have to pre-treat your paper with an anti-static tool. They've pre-coated it or whatever, treated it, and you don't have to do that. See those grid lines? Isn't that neat? And I just did a very simple sentiment because I really wanted those grid lines to show. I just think that's so cool. What an unexpected surprise. So an acrylic block and embossing powder. Next up is water. Good old-fashioned H2O. Flick it on there. I am using watercolored cardstock here because I didn't want the water to pill up, but you can try it with regular cardstock if that's what you have. So I put on big puddles of water, and then I am sprinkling, dumping, I guess you could call it, not really sprinkling here, on some embossing powder. And you can see it's sticking to where all those big blobs of water is. So big puddles of water is key, and then patience is key, because I did not put any embossing ink down. So this is going to take like triple the time it would take to dry if you were using regular embossing ink. But I think the results are super cool. So just go from the front and the back, keep flipping forward and backwards over and over. Don't keep your heat tool in the same place too long on the paper, or you will burn your paper. And then when you're done, you get something like this. I love all those big blobs of water and the embossing powder here. Next up is glue strips, any kind of glue, double-sided glue tape that you have. I have different widths from scrapbook.com, but there are so many different places that carry it. This double-sided glue you can just tear with your fingers, so I especially love that. I don't have to cut anything down. I'm just using a little magnet to hold my paper in place. You don't need that, but I'm just adding various strips all over the place. And then I will peel back that backing paper here so all that stickiness is exposed. So when you dump your embossing powder onto the sticky strips, it's going to stick, and then you can heat emboss it. So I'm going in with two different kinds of colors here, a gold and an orange, to pair with a die cut tag I'd already heat embossed in for another project and never used, Harry Potter themed of course. And so you can watch it dry. Look at this, let's just watch it dry. All right, that was unnecessary. Anywho, but you can see how it dries there. And then to finish off the card, I just adhered that die cut that I had already done right here over the top, and bada bing, bada boom. Now, swinking is another thing you can do. If you're not familiar with this word, it's a word that I made up for ink blending and swiping. I have a whole video on various techniques you can do with swinking, so I will link that up here in the information card on the right-hand side or down in the description below. So I'm just taking my pad. I did go ahead and refill that pad. You saw me, the Wow has that roller ball, so I love how easy it is to re-ink. You just roll the ball over the pad. And I swinked that onto my cardstock. All the cardstock, with the exception of the water one, is just regular cardstock from my stash. And I don't think the weight matters or anything like that. And then if you want to, you can add a little brush detail by kind of brushing away some of the embossing powder with a dry brush. This is another embossing refill tool you can use from Wow. It has the same embossing ink as Wow. It's just in a paintbrush or fingernail polish type situation here. It goes on really thick, but you get some really detailed strokes here, and I'll show you what I mean. So this is more of a mixed media. It was created in combination with Seth Apter and Wow, and you can see you get really cool like brush stroke looks here. And if you want to pull back any of that embossing powder or add anything to it, just grab yourself a dry paintbrush, dry is key, and you can go in and add flicks or do whatever you want to do here. And then once you're satisfied, we're going to go ahead and heat set both of these with my embossing gun here. While I'm working on that, let me show you the new desk I got. This is a rising desk from FlexiSpot. It goes up and down. It's got this little keypad on the front, and it's got memory settings for when you're standing and sitting, and it also has a child lock, which I'm grateful for because I got kids. So look how high this goes. Look at up, 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 up. Hey, you can get up under there. You can do some lunges, whatever you want to do, but it gets really high. So a lot of times when I'm crafting, I do a lot of my work standing up. But when I'm editing my videos, I sit down. So this is a great feature because I can just lower it to sitting position as well. So I can use it standing, sitting, whatever. It's got a bamboo top. It's got a bunch of different size options. Check it out. It's completely sturdy and awesome, and I love it. I have a discount code below in the description for you. They've got a super deal going on with Black Friday and Cyber Monday, so check my description, and thank you for sponsoring. Now let's get back to the projects. You can see I am still heat embossing. So you didn't miss much, but I'm still going and going until you make sure it's all good and shiny, and then you know your embossing powder is dry. And then here's a look at the two finished cards. I just pulled the flower and the sentiments from my magic mug, and that is that. Less is more because I really wanted that embossing to show through. Next up is stenciling two different ways. I'm using the same stencil here. This is a stencil from Catherine Pooler. As always, all the supplies that I'm using are linked below in the description below, but I do encourage you to use what you have. So you can go in and add your embossing ink a couple of different ways. You can use a blending tool and kind of pounce it through the open holes of the stencil. I do encourage with this technique to try to find a stencil that has a lot of open gaps like these leaves do. Or you can take the pad and just smush it down on there. I just wanted to show you both ways, whatever floats your boat. So I'm smushing the ink pad on through that stencil, and you can see it picked up. And there is a lot of ink on that stencil still left over. I flipped it over and I'm trying to press it down to kind of stamp with the stencil, but not a lot transferred. So what I did, I didn't do anything else, not a lot transferred at all. So I'm just gonna run this through my die cutting machine without any dies. And the pressure pushed all that ink from the stencil onto the card base, but also inset it there. I had something stuck in my die cutting machine, so I'll deal with that in a bit. So anyway, did not add any more embossing ink to that stencil. I just simply ran it through my embossing machine without any dies. Same plate formulation, same everything. Then I'm gonna go ahead and dump on, this is some old stuff. I think he still might have it, but this is from Brutus Monroe. It's like emerald green or something, embossing powder. And it is an opaque, so what that means is it will show up on dark colored cardstock, which I'm a huge fan of opaque embossing powders because you can get multi-use. Shows up on dark cardstock and light cardstock. And then I'll just go ahead and heat set this. And you get two totally different looks because the one that we ran through the embossing machine almost acted as like a dry embossing folder because it pressed the leaf into the paper like that, and then it embossed at the same time, which I think is so cool. So two different looks using the same exact stencil. And then to finish off the card, again, I went very simple. I just pulled sentiments from my magic mug. Here's a look at this first one. So I did some partial stenciling. You can see I didn't pull it all through from edge to edge. And then the other one, I just simply die cut a circle and use that as a focal point. And I kept this one sentiment free, so I can write a sentiment on the inside, or I can put a sentiment on as the occasion fits later. So here's all the cards I made in today's video using embossing powders. Such inexpensive little guys, but man, they're so much fun. Did you have a favorite technique? Let me know. If you have other techniques, let me know. And I can't wait to hear from you, and I'll see you in my next video.